Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Lincoln to Local. I'm Krista Carroll, and today we will be covering a few pieces of legislation, including water rights and the agriculture sales tax exemption. Joining me today is Kaylee Holman with our public policy team. So Kaylee, Oklahoma Farm Bureau is a big advocate for property rights and water rights, and there's a piece of legislation that just passed through a Senate committee pertaining to both of those. Can you kind of touch on what that is and how that affects our members?
Yes, so it has to do with who is an interested party when it comes to water right protests. And so specifically it clarifies that if you are protesting on the grounds of a specific industry or entity, then that doesn't qualify as an interested party. So kind of specifically here, maybe if you're just protesting because you don't like the poultry industry or the oil and gas industry, that's not qualified as an interested party. There needs to be a specific reason as to why you are protesting somebody's water permit, which is reasonable so you don't have frivolous lawsuits. And it also says that if somebody is protesting, appealing a Oklahoma Water Resources Board decision on a water permit, that will be considered frivolous, and it opens them up actually to repercussions if they're filing these kinds of cases. Additionally, if the Water Resources Board grants someone a permit and that decision is appealed through protest, it goes to court, but the Water Resources Board has deemed that their permit is valid and has granted them water rights, then that individual that has been granted permit for the groundwater rights, they can continue utilizing that water. Their water rights wouldn't be revoked while that appeal went through the court process.
Another issue that Farm Bureau has talked a lot about this legislative session is the Oklahoma State Vet Med Authority. And there's another piece of legislation also that came through a Senate committee this week that pertains to that. Can you explain kind of how that affects our members as well?
Yes, so obviously a lot of our members deal with large animal veterinarians quite regularly, and so the OSU Vet Medical School is very important to them. And so this would give them a similar authority to what OSU and OU both have for their health medical colleges, the authority that they have. And so it would really allow them to kind of direct themselves a little bit more as far as funding and making sure that their mission and their vision is carried out in a more efficient way, that they kind of have more direct authority over how the college is being ran, as far as training facilities, the hospital that is there at OSU for the vet med trainees, and the general public that take some of their animals up there occasionally.
Another bill that we've kind of talked about is this bill that would allow 4-H absences to be excused. Can you explain what that is and what that means for rural Oklahomans and youth as well?
Yeah, so this was a bill that was initially presented and introduced last year that didn't ultimately get signed into law. And a lot of people were kind of surprised because several schools across the state do exempt 4-H activities, ones that have been approved, not just say so, but approved 4-H activities as an excused absence similar to what FFA and sporting activities receive, but it's not statutorily required. And so we have had a couple instances where some 4-H students are going to sanctioned events, but they're being docked for an unexcused absence. And in Oklahoma, there's only a specific amount that a student can have per semester before there's possibly official and legal action taken against that student, because obviously being in school is important. And so this bill would say that if a student is at a legitimate 4-H activity, that they would be the school would be required to give them an excused absence.
Medical marijuana and marijuana in general have been a topic of conversation this legislative session, and there is a bill that came through one of the House committees this week about marijuana industry being in the agriculture sales tax exemption. Can you explain what that bill does and how that affects agriculture?
Yeah, so actually when the voters several years ago passed medical marijuana, there was nothing in the language or in any legislation that was passed by the legislature thereafter saying that medical marijuana harvesting, cultivation, anything like that was a reason to have an ag sales tax exemption. It was a decision made by the tax commission, and there's kind of been a little bit of an issue in the past couple of years that a lot of people that are producing medical marijuana actually have a much easier time getting an ag sales tax exemption than traditional agriculture producers. And so this bill would specifically eliminate the growing, harvesting, or the cultivating of medical marijuana from the definition of what qualifies as agriculture. And so they would not be able to utilize those things to get an ag sales tax permit. Now, if we had somebody that was producing medical marijuana, processing it, and they also ran cattle or did something that was like a traditional farming purpose, they would be able to get an ag sales tax exemption through that mechanism. But somebody that was, the large majority of people that are producing medical marijuana aren't also producing traditional agriculture products, and so those individuals would not be able to get an ag sales tax exemption.
Well, it sounds like it's been a really busy week this last week, and I'm sure there is more to come. Is there anything that Farm Bureau members should be on the lookout for in the coming couple of weeks of session?
Yeah, definitely. So this week was busy with committee work. Next Thursday is the next deadline where bills have to be out of committee of the opposite chamber of origin, and then we'll have 2 weeks. It'll be a pretty mad dash when bills have to be off the floor of their opposite committee. So it'll be a very busy month, which is pretty much anticipated every session for it to line up like this. So it'll be busy. A lot of legislators working on their bills and trying to make sure that they get through the necessary hurdles by their deadlines. Additionally, next week, next Tuesday, April the 11th, is going to be the Ag Day at the Capitol. So we'll have people from across industry set up there. So we would love to have our members attend that day if possible. Additionally, one of our dear members that we all greatly miss, Bob Howard, is going to be inducted into the Ag Hall of Fame. And so that will be taking place also on Tuesday as part of the Ag Day at the Capitol festivities. So we would love to have any of our members join us for that day.
Well, perfect. Thank you for joining me today, Kaylee, and thank all of you for joining us on this week's episode of Lincoln to Local.